God bless everybody. Today it is September 2nd of 2024, and I wanted to do a little bit of a financial update. I haven't done one for a few months. Hopefully everybody is having a fantastic and safe Labor Day weekend, and I know everybody's going to be driving today, heading back to work probably tomorrow in general, so hopefully everybody gets to their destination safely. We're just going to cover a couple quick things here and things I'm seeing on the charts. And like I say, these things can be basically mapped out in general, and so you can actually see what's happening. And I had done a video approximately 4 months ago about where I thought most of this was going, and we have been heading there pretty substantially. So let's look at some of this. So we're going to cover gold, Bitcoin, and treasuries here because we're getting ready to watch the inversion, uninvert, and we've seen gold now. Like I said, I did this 4 months ago. We see gold now over $2,500. Bitcoin went under 60,000 after it went to 74, and the 2-year bonds are starting to basically uninvert, and that will immediately send us into a recessionary, depressionary process. That when you get into the Bitcoin chart, there's a lot going on here, and we are in a wedge. So this trend line moving down and this trend line coming across makes a wedge. Okay, this is a descending wedge. As you can see, it's moving down. You have high or lower highs in this is a month chart, so you have these lower highs. They constantly are moving down. Actually, the trajectory is starting to bend. These lines are moving and bending down, and so what's going to happen is we have basically a gap of between 61,000 and this 42,000 down here. You've dropped below this marker here, and you're starting to move back down to this support line, which is at 42,000 or 41,000. If that falls through there, you could go down to this next support line, okay, which would be, 26,500. If it falls through that, you could end up down in here because there's no real memory once you get down through some of here, because the chart hasn't been out here that long. Bitcoin's only been out here, since back when it started, 20, 30 years ago. So there's not a huge amount of history. And when you get into this zone here, all you have are these areas here to support it, and as you can see, it hits this reactor a lot of times, and then it just dumps. It came over there, this area, or the major resistance line here, and then it dumped, and then it hit this moving day average and moved back up. But now you're back below the moving average, which means that you're probably going to go lower unless it can break through that resistance of this moving day average. So in my opinion, as you move into, and I've said this for some time, and once we get into September, which we are now, into October, into the fourth quarter, and you start to see unemployment tick up and different things like that, we're going to start to see massive volatility. You've got this Hezbollah thing breaking out in Israel, potentially Turkey coming down the beginning of the year, and you have an election cycle in November that's probably going to be extremely disruptive in the markets. All these things are starting to matter. So right now I could see this potentially Bitcoin going down in the next couple months, within the next month or two, because this could spike sort of like this did down to a level of approximately, like I say, about 42,000. And that's probably a good buy position. If it goes down further, this could fall out. I don't know if we're quite there yet. This may take a few more months. You also have a Fed meeting on September 18th, which could change this whole trajectory. You got some CPI inflationary numbers, and they're lying about the job numbers and unemployment and things like that, as we just saw a revision of 818,000 jobs. We can't really get a handle on unemployment and the type of unemployment, because a lot of the jobs are being taken over by foreigners, and the Americans really haven't grown in jobs in the last year or two. It's just been stagnant on the United States citizens, but we're seeing a lot of penetration through the foreign workers that are coming in that are illegal. They're taking a lot of these jobs that they say that we as Americans won't do for whatever reason. So I see this on Bitcoin. I think this is going to fall out. I think we're going to see massive volatility. This could do a bounce, and so this could come down. It could bounce and come back up and start working this wedge, okay, until you get down into here somewhere. And then it could fall out completely, because there will be a point where it will either come up over this resistance line or it will fall through this support line, because this is the history of, the lower portion history of the chart. So if that happens, then we're looking at potentially this could go down into the below 15,000. I talked about this. We had that a number of years back where I indicated we were like 68,000. I said, look, Doge is going to go to 8 cents and Bitcoin's probably going to go under 15,000. Well, it did. Right about here. Okay. That video was back in here somewhere. So I'm just saying the charts will tell you, just like the charts in the Paradigm 2030 will tell you what's coming up in the next 1,500 or 1,835 days of the Feast of Trumpets of 29, September 10th, which is what you need to have oil in your lamp for, or these 1,835 days as we move forward. You can chart these things out, and I've said this for some time. You need to understand what's going to happen in the markets, because this is going to break down into a beast system as we move forward in the next few years. I have a April 10th, 2026 signing with the Antichrist before you go into the 1,260 days before the Feast of Trumpets of 29. And so that's extremely important, that we have approximately about a year and a half before this whole system is going to collapse on us, and we need to keep an eye on these things. So I talked about how gold would move up to over 2,500, and I believe as we get into 2025 it's going to move up to 3,000, and that's mainly due to the amount of debt that's being leveraged on this country, as we're 35 plus trillion in the hole. That's going to move up to 45 trillion soon as we escalate this process. And as that moves up throughout the history of gold, you're going to see gold just basically move up. And you can see in this chart, you have a high, then you have a higher high, then a higher high, then a higher high, and it's just keep moving up throughout the time of the history of the gold chart. So I've talked about how gold and silver will just react to the amount of debt load that we have. And so as you go into 45 trillion, as we move forward in the next few years, we will see gold and silver spike. If you have a geopolitical real issue on the ground as the Middle East breaks out, or possibly as we've seen, Ukraine has penetrated into Russia, and so that's expanding over there, and potentially you might have a potential war with China, Taiwan on that front, or you got North Korea. You got all these different geopolitical issues that could force people to go into a fear factor, which then would move them from equities into metals or other safe havens. And as you can see, dollar to gold ratio now is actually about $3,417, and so this could easily spike up and go parabolic, and silver could even go higher. And that's what I say, you know, if you look at silver in general, its ratio and its dispersion is like 80 to 90 to 1 to gold now, which is insane, or it should be about 20 to 1. So I just want you to realize that gold is moving up. We could see it drop. So as we move into the election cycle, this geopolitical issue, as we get into the first of the year, potentially Turkey coming down and the Middle East inflaming, people are going to move from equities into metals and things like this. Right now you are under the 200-day moving average. In general, metals are moving down. They could dump you can see a fairly decent decrease in metals, and you've got some areas here around 24.50. You've got this candle where it went parabolic, and right there you have a support line which actually runs all the way over to here, where you can see that high. Now you've got one here, okay, which is where we're heading right now. If you look at that, you're heading down to this support. Then if you go over to here, you've got another one down around this 24.50, okay. If you look at these bottom supports and stuff where you could go down into this area here, you could actually go down further. I don't know if we'll get down that far. Metals will dump, I believe, and you'll get a buy opportunity before it goes parabolic. And so I think there will be a buying opportunity on both gold and silver. And I think your best opportunity, if you're doing any kind of stacking silver or things like that, or just trying to offset potential destruction of paper money to metals, which would then offset your loss on that side with a gain on the price of metals in general. We do see something here, and gold and silver are not working completely in tandem here because of the dispersion. But you got a higher, or you got a high here with a lower high with a lower high, and it's moving down, and you have this support around 26.50. Okay, then you got another support here around just around $26, and then you got another support of 24.36. So I've been talking to people lately and saying, well, I think if you look at where this could head, and this could be pushed down into this area because you're under the 200-day moving average, that this could fall between 26.50 and approximately 24.50, and that would be your buying zone if you're actually going to do it. Now, I'm not a financial advisor here, guys. I'm just saying that as your paper dollars get more and more worthless due to the inflation and the treasuries being sold off coming back to us throughout the world, that's hyperinflating us. The petrodollar could go away. That could make your dollars worthless. You're watching a downtrend in metals right now. You're watching Bitcoin potentially dump to 42,000 or lower. This is probably going to go down with it. And then once these things pop and spike, you're going to see that parabolic move, which is going to offset your money loss on the paper side. Now, I know that gold and silver won't be the solution at the end days. Okay, that's not what this is about. Look, you're trying to find a way to stay off the system, be able to use the metals to barter for food or essentials as the system breaks down, and you can stay off the beast system because you have a monetary physical piece of metal in your hand that people want throughout the time of history. Okay, so it's important that you have a little bit of this back, even a few ounces for an emergency type situation. So I just want to point out a few things here. Here we have a wedge. Okay, so that's pretty important. This is moving down to the bottom of the support on the wedge. That's around 27 $23 or maybe even around $27 here. This support that moves back, which ends up at the bottom of this candle, is around 26.50. Okay, that's why I keep saying, if you look at the charts, I think you have a buying opportunity when it drops below 26.50. Now it could come down and bounce and then come back up, but if it comes down and retests this area down in here, it could actually drop down into this area around this 26.50 area. Okay, if it falls through that, you don't have a lot of history back here, and you have this parabolic candle, which then would take you down to around 24.50. Okay, so I think this is probably the lowest area or the buy area before it would come down, potentially hit off this, and then go parabolically up. Right now, like I say, you're in a high with a lower high with a lower high, moving potentially into a lower high. But once this breaks, silver, gold will parabolically break out of this wedge, wherever that ends up. And you would see this potentially go parabolic. And like I say, once it hits this area of approximately $32 in the history of time, and you can go back and look at this, there is nothing back here to really do anything to support it. If you go out and change the chart to a month, you can see the high was approximately $49 and almost $50. And that's what I mean. You're looking at one of these parabolic moves up. Okay, you're starting this parabolic move up. This is a high with a higher high, and this potentially could even be a higher high than this as you move up. And then once you break this $50 mark, there's nothing to hold it back. This could go up to $100 overnight. Okay, so just realize it. I want to bring these charts to your attention, and that you potentially have a buy opportunity sometime probably in September, October, as you watch metals tank before the election cycle. We move into a pretty volatile situation at the beginning of the first of the year, and then you would probably see your metals spike up pretty radically in 2025. And I think you will easily see $3,000 gold at the beginning of the first quarter or second quarter of 2025, in my opinion. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I brought this up many times, is we're in a massive inversion and have been in a massive inversion since approximately July, around, it's interesting, around the 4th of July of 2022, our Independence Day, we went into this inversion, and we've been in this inversion pretty much since. But as you can see, we popped out of that inversion for a short period of time, and that inversion is getting ready to go back up, which will normalize the markets, and you will see that 2-year bond level out around 4%, and your 10-year will spike up over your 2, and that will invert. But then you have to decide, well, where is my 10-year bond rate going to end up? Okay, your 10 could move up into a parabolic move like we had back in the 70s. And if you get an embargo against oil like we had back in the 70s, and we had those gas lines, and home interest rates were at like 15 to 18%, and I lived through a lot of that. You couldn't get gas except on certain days. There were lines to the gas station miles long. it was a terrible time. People couldn't work, unemployment spiked, which is what we're going to see here. Also, as you move up, you don't have a lot of history back here, guys. Once this moves up, you're going to go through these plateaus fairly quickly, okay? And this is going to move up to a level that's going to put, like Jay Powell says, a lot of massive pain on the population. So right now you have this inversion that's getting ready to uninvert, and it just recently did for a short period of time, okay? So as you walked into Friday, this gapped down to just a point or two. So we're at the very edge of this inversion, uninverting, which in the time of history has always caused a recession, okay? And this is extremely important that we understand these things. So I believe after this weekend, as we move into September 18th, we're going to see this uninvert. That's going to really cause Jay Powell and the Fed a real problem in how they're going to move forward. And Jay's going to have to start doing massive cuttings because he follows the 2-year bond, which is at 4%, and he's at 5.5%. So he needs to really cut, and should have been cutting since like March when the 2-year bond went to 4%. He should have already started cutting. He's behind the ball. And they're propping this up, and they're doing this for an election cycle as we go into November. And so he's going to signal he's cutting. He just had a dovish meeting at Jackson Hole. And like I said, I think this was when this actually started to transverse into an inversion, which we saw right here. And the whole financial system is getting ready to change as we move into the first quarter of 2025, and we go into an inauguration of a new president, whoever that might be, on one side or the other. So just realize this is all happening out here. I don't want to bring some of these to your attention because I think this is extremely important, and it will affect you. You know, if we have a big breakout in the Middle East, that's going to spike fuel, that's going to spike inflation. We're already watching layoffs on an unprecedented scale. Even they're not telling you that in the news. You can go out and look at all the different articles out here of all the different companies that are laying people off. And so it's extremely important. The people that are getting laid off, it's harder to find a different job, and all the illegals are taking the jobs that we do have. And so you know, it's interesting that when Kamala Harris came in as a vice president, became the czar of the border, we saw these massive increases in jobs in illegals and things, as we saw a massive fall off in domestic jobs through citizens here in the United States. And so this is extremely important that we put this all in context. And there's charts out there. Go look at them. Look at when she became the czar of the border, and then look at the amount of increase in border penetrations and saturation into our country. And you'll see, as you look at the job numbers, the only jobs that are being created are through illegals coming into this country, or governmental jobs to prop the numbers up to make this administration look like they're actually creating real jobs, when they're creating taxpayer jobs through the government system, and illegal jobs which are basically taking the jobs of our own citizens. And so I just think it needs to be brought into context. So I just wanted to bring this to your report. I think this is extremely important, and that you're going to start to watch these markets really tank. You have a Feast of Trumpets coming up with a solar eclipse on it. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention real quick. On September 18th, on the day of the Fed meeting, you have a blood moon partial event, which is probably destruction on our global financial systems, especially here in the United States. Then you get into an annual solar eclipse on the Feast of Trumpets, and you have the first day of the new Jewish calendar as you walk into on the new civil calendar as you walk into October 3rd. And so I really think we have a lot going on here, guys, as we move into the first part of the year and we start to see a potential judgment against Egypt based on my charting here. So just realize there's a huge event on the 18th, which is the decision of the Fed to raise or lower rates, which they're going to lower rates. And you might get a 50% cut, which would then send the markets up, but it's going to send volatility and fear into the markets. And it's also going to really spike the bonds, which is going to uninvert. And then you're going to watch that 10 go parabolic over the 2. So just realize that's happening. God bless everybody. Hopefully everybody gets home for a safe Labor Day weekend. And I hope you enjoyed this weekend, because as I believe we move forward, things are going to start to break down, and we're not going to have the ability to have these nice weekends that we have anymore. And people are going to really start to struggle on the ground. So God bless and have a great night.